Biden immediately set off in another direction, provoking yet another conflict, this one in Eastern Europe. And he provoked it. They lie about it, but it's true. The facts are out there, and it's very obvious. So just days after the Russian government announced yet again that if Ukraine joined NATO didn't even want Ukraine to join, but if Ukraine were to join NATO, then the Russian army would invade Ukraine. So days after they said this for like the 50th time in a row, Kamala Harris arrived at the Munich Security Conference and publicly, reading from a script, called for Ukraine to join NATO. She read the words. They were written by someone at the State Department, so they knew exactly what they were doing when they did it. They wanted a war with Russia, and now we have one. We're not winning that war, by the way. The main American casualty so far has been our economy, which is dying. So what was the point of this exercise? Maybe someday they will tell us. But we don't have time to think about it because now we have yet another potential war to contend with. And it comes in Asia. Just what we need. This week, with the blessing of the Biden administration, Nancy Pelosi decided to head to Taiwan. That's all but confirmed at this point. Government officials in Taipei have just been notified that Pelosi's arrival is imminent. She may be in the air right now. She's definitely coming, one source told the Wall Street Journal. The only variable is whether she spends the night. So Nancy Pelosi goes to Taipei. What's the effect of that? Well, we don't need to guess. The Chinese government has said repeatedly and clearly that if Nancy Pelosi lands in Taiwan, it could trigger a global war. Watch.
A Chinese spokesperson said there would be serious consequences for the visit, over the weekend conducting military drills at sea.
If House Speaker Pelosi insists on visiting Taiwan, China will take resolute and strong measures to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Are they bluffing? It doesn't sound like it, actually. A representative of Chinese state media said this, quote, if U.S. fighter jets escort Pelosi's plane into Taiwan, it is an invasion. The Chinese army has the right to forcibly dispel Pelosi's plane and the U.S. fighter jets, including firing warning shots and making tactical movement of obstruction. If ineffective, then shoot them down. Oh, shoot them down. Okay. So the White House naturally was asked about this. We're suddenly on the brink of yet another global war, potentially a nuclear war, because Nancy Pelosi has been given the green light by the White House to fly to Taiwan. So what's the White House view of this? Listen.
An official who is associated with Chinese state media is suggesting that if Speaker Pelosi tries to go to Taiwan, her plane could be shot down. Does the president have a response to that?
You know, I've been asked about, I know you're asking specifically about the rhetoric that we're hearing from China, but as it relates to the speaker's travels, it's something that we're just not going to speak to. Right now, that's a hypothetical.
It doesn't seem like a big deal to put dumb people in positions of authority. Oh, we're helping them out. She's breaking ceilings. Okay, got it. Until something terrible goes wrong, which inevitably happens when you're running the biggest country in the world. That's a hypothetical, says Karine Jean-Pierre, even though, of course, it's the opposite of a hypothetical. There's nothing hypothetical about it. China has repeatedly threatened to shoot down the plane carrying America's Speaker of the House, third in line for the presidency. And yet no one seems to think this is a big deal. This is one of the weirdest moments in the weirdest presidency in American history. The Biden administration is provoking a hot war with China, which by itself would seem to be headline news. So on every level, meaningfully on the policy levels that matter, Biden has been more pro-China than any president, and yet he seems to want a war with China now. This does not make any sense at all. In fact, it only makes sense if the Biden White House is intentionally trying to weaken and destroy the United States. There's no other logical explanation for what we're seeing now. And in fact, the template is very familiar. What's happening in China looks very much like what happened in Ukraine earlier this year. The administration sends the least capable possible emissary to a flashpoint in a faraway part of the world in order to provoke a violent response. Then it was Kamala Harris, who was an international joke, the last person you would send to negotiate any kind of peaceful settlement to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. But they sent her anyway. She exacerbated it, and they got what they wanted, which was an invasion of Ukraine and a war with Russia, which is what they wanted.
Not that any American should really care, but China apparently is fuming tonight, and they're throwing a temper tantrum after Speaker Pelosi followed through on that visit to Taiwan, where she stressed the need for solidarity with our Pacific ally. Now, in response, we're learning about an apparent cyber attack against Taiwan's presidential office. Meanwhile, China's defense ministry announced today that Beijing will now hold targeted drills and missile tests all around Taiwan. Still, Pelosi, once they made the threat, she had to go. She had to visit. It would have projected nothing but pure weakness. Otherwise, America cannot ever be bullied by the CCP or by anybody. Now, it was only, last week that the president of China humiliated Joe Biden, and they were bragging about it, lecturing Biden, threatening Biden. Joe should have pressed President Xi on the origins of COVID, China's unfair trade practices, certainly intellectual property theft, their oppression against the minority Uyghurs, and the Chinese fighter jets flying in Taiwan's airspace every other day, along with talk of reunification, which is a takeover of Taiwan, or as Xi likes to claim. Anyway, so again, ask yourself, why is Biden and the White House not standing by Pelosi? Why are they buckling under the pressure to China? Why are there reports Biden didn't want Pelosi to go? You know, how weak can our president be? And even the far-left media mob is now slamming the speaker. They're joining with Biden. They want Biden to continue to be weak. You got Thomas Friedman, idiot that he is, at the New York Times, writing a piece entitled "Why Pelosi's Visit to Taiwan is Utterly Reckless." One former Obama NSC advisor saying Pelosi's visit was not in America's best interest. Why not? Take a look.
So I think this is a trip which does not serve U.S. interests. It's because of Speaker Pelosi's desire to go. I think people in the administration were not enthusiastic about it for the start, but unfortunately, Speaker Pelosi apparently decided to proceed and required that President Biden call her to call it off, which he didn't do.
Not only did Joe get threatened by President Xi, even worse than that, all the China's of threats, Joe sold China 1 million barrels of oil from our strategic oil reserves. Why would we do that when we're paying record high gas prices? And by the way, why does he now want to lift tariffs on China? What have they done to deserve such treatment?
Nancy Pelosi has been given the green light by the White House to fly to Taiwan.
Pelosi Taiwan trip left a fuming White House scrambling for a plan, before Nancy Pelosi landed in Taipei for a controversial meeting with President Tsai Ing-wen. The White House was careful not to weigh in on the trip, stressing that the Speaker of the House makes her own decisions. But behind the scenes, officials in President Joe Biden administration were fuming at her insistence on using the trip as a capstone for her career at a moment of highly delicate relations with Beijing. In an effort to quietly persuade Pelosi to delay the visit, the White House dispatched senior members of the National Security Council, as well as State Department officials, to brief the Speaker and her team on the geopolitical risks. People familiar with the conversation said,
"Well, I think that the military thinks it's not a good idea right now, but I don't know what the status of it is."